What characters are always good in fighting games? What archetypes are almost always powerful? The first one that I thought of was glass cannon characters. They just have the best versions or some of the best versions of all the tools in the game, and they just have lower life. That's like a normal way to do it. What ends up happening is they are so good at so many places on the screen that they win so many more interactions than other characters, and their life total tends to not be as big of a problem. So like Akuma, he's really good in a bunch of versions of Street Fighter 4, really good in a bunch of versions of Street Fighter 5. Characters like Emilia and Chip in Guilty Gear, good in a bunch of versions of all those different games. Even Baiken before, right? Baiken had pretty low life. It turns out that the life total has to be pretty severe for those tool sets to not really help. It's very rare that they're just straight bad. Another archetype that's like that to me is puppet characters. You know, the weaknesses of these archetypes are supposed to be clear, right? Like glass cannon characters, obviously they have low amounts of life, or you know, in KI, Mira spends her own life, which she can get back to like do her best moves. And Arya, her health is split up into 3 different bodies. So the bodies can get one shot pretty easily. And once they're dead, and you lose the assist and you lose a bunch of powers. And Arya, by the way, is super, super, super strong. But puppet characters, I think they themselves are not the strongest without their puppet, usually, right? But once their puppet's out, they usually tend to be extremely powerful, especially on offense. But sometimes also in neutral, puppet characters end up having unique movement or like tools in their toolkit that are supposed to be used in conjunction with the puppet. And those things end up helping them a lot, just like in neutral or in offense, even without the puppet, right? And a lot of times losing the puppet is like not that bad for these archetypes. Like they don't make it as punishing as you'd expect, or the puppet is just so powerful once it's out that your options against it are like incredibly miserable. It's almost always that they're really durable as an archetype. Somehow they just let them cook. Usually if they're not strong, it's because their puppet's really easy to kill, or they're extremely vulnerable without their puppet, or it's really hard for them to get going. But puppet characters are cheap. You can think of a lot of puppet characters, I'm sure, that are very strong in almost every fighting game. You guys are bringing up Carl. Like Zappa, too, is another good example. Because the puppet gets to do most of the work, they themselves can run you over without really ever putting themselves in extreme danger. They can win interactions without committing their body to the cause, you know what I mean? Yeah, it is let them cook, but for real, it's just Zato watching as Eddie is working on you. I was gonna say for another archetype, Setplay characters, I think also for similar reasons we just talked about, almost always an archetype that's extremely dangerous. Whatever happens in every other part of the match, they almost always have interactions that they can put you in that are extremely messed up. They kind of remove the interaction from you and your opponent that's not just can you survive this offense. This kind of game plan is good in like every game. And it's funny because LK was doing a video about archetypes a long time ago. He was saying that almost every fighting game tries to nerf set play. There's got to be a wall here, or Dragon Ball needs 40 frames of a variable get up timing and tech this way, tech that way, do all this stuff, and frame one reflect, and like being able to just continuously run powerful offense and mix-ups on somebody over and over and over is really dangerous. And oftentimes it's not extremely committal for them. Like they have a projectile or a thing they can put on you and then run like extremely safe, good offense, especially if the character has good neutral too. That's when they tend to be the most messed up. You're telling me I'm gonna struggle in neutral, and when you hit me, I'm gonna explode? Like, I guess I'm dead. Someone also brought up characters who place traps on the screen. And I was gonna say, I think zoning characters are archetypes that tend to be pretty durable too. Do you guys remember Fairy in Grand Blue? I couldn't believe that character existed when the game came out. But like Fairy had ridiculously good neutral, and then had a belligerently powerful defensive mid-range thing to mash in her sweep and DP. And her sweep always traded in her favor because, like, you know, you got knocked down and then she just ran some of the best in class offense in the game. It was like, you know, overhead low, left, right. You like, how did they let her cook like this? As long as they can zone well, and they have one other thing that's good, either their defense up close is really hard to deal with, or their offense is incredibly strong, they're probably going to be pesky at the very least, and maybe even better. I think projectile zoners tend to be better because if they are really powerful, then the projectile is hard to deal with, even if you have good anti-projectile moves probably. And normal zoners put themselves at somewhat risk in the sense that, like, you don't have the same kind of coverage. Like, projectiles can still anti-air people much easier than like a grounded poke that's supposed to hit on the ground can hit them. Street Fighter 6 is like, has good anti-projectile moves, and they're still not good enough to beat Guile Boom. And like, if you look at the top tier in almost every game, it's almost always like those kinds of characters. And I mean the best. Like some archetypes, like Shotos or like mid-range, like well-rounded characters, that kind of archetype, those two are like, yeah, they're almost always pretty good. But like, I don't think about them as like, this will be the best archetype in the game. Especially in the beginning of the game, Shotos or well-rounders tend to be really strong, and then either they fall off or get nerfed. Or they're Luke. Yeah, he got released later though. To me, Luke is like a Kuma. They just decided like, all right, what if he was just the best at everything, but didn't have low health? It's interesting too, because I think every archetype has examples of them being the cheapest characters. So it depends on what games you play, what archetypes you tend to think are better. Listen. Are you ever commentating Capcom events? Question mark, Street Fighter 6. If they ask me, I'll do it. If they are sitting there thinking to themselves, we need some more people who know how to do analysis of our games, to like dig into the deep, meaningful part of our games. And we're missing someone on our roster. This has been a hole for a while now, since, I don't know, the end of 2019, early 2020. We haven't really found anybody to replace that aspect of our broadcast for 3 years. If we can find anybody who's good at that, we should find them and hire them. Then, they can send me an email.